Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to talk about minions who outperform their King Minion. This video was suggested by Samuel Friedbaum, and I found it interesting because it asked the question of why I focus on the King of the Hill series normally. I could easily do videos on whole factions, but I choose to focus on the King Minion because it should be the driving force of the faction. Most factions have the same structure. One king at roughly power 5, 2 4s, 3 3s, and 4 2s, and if you have this structure, the King Minion should be leading the charge. It should also give clear indication of the faction's goals and strategies. It should be the best minion in the faction. But these are not always the case, and it's good to look at examples where it is not. Who are the minions who outperform their seniors? One way to think about this is to consider which minions cross your mind most when thinking about synergies. If you keep coming back to singular minions, as opposed to the minions of a faction as a whole, that's generally a sign of outperforming. Minions can outperform at any level, and I've chosen 5 minions per tier. But to avoid going over the obvious candidates I beat to death, I will not go over First Mate, Shinobi, and the Invader. They already have enough of the spotlight. To highlight the idea of outclassing, consider that minions tend to get better as you go up tiers. Sometimes this is objectively true, such as the Gem Grabber being capped at 1 treasure and the Loot Lover being uncapped. The Spartan gets 1 counter on your turn, while Odysseus gives 1 counter per action you play, regardless of turn. Sometimes it is much more subtle when abilities are different. In these examples, the outperformers will not be objectively better, but anecdotally. So I've created a ranking for each category. These aren't necessarily statements that the King Minion is bad, just not the faction or synergy's headliner. So let's start with the tier 2s, and my number 5 is the Mild-Mannered Citizen. When you look at the superhero abilities, they are good, but nothing earth-shattering. You typically want the best hero for a particular situation, and the MMC facilitates that. It also gives you easy access to your partner King Minions, some of which desperately want to come out early and often. And I think it's common that the partner King Minion is the first and most frequent choice. For this reason, I think the Mild-Mannered Citizen is the king of the superhero faction. My number 4 is the Cub Scout. I have to constantly remind myself that this minion is the 4 copy slot, because the printed power throws me off. General Ivan is great, but his ability doesn't directly help the Bear Cavalry any more than other factions. And while mass indestructibility does create some strategies, the vast majority of Bear Cavalry synergies involve feeding minions into the Cub Scout and watching them die. This can completely shut down specific factions that are movement-based and can combine with other factions for true area control. And there are other ways to facilitate indestructibility than General Ivan, whereas the Cub Scout area control isn't easily matched. My number 3 is the Jumper, who is this high because of the time box. The Jumpers were great in specific situations beforehand, usually free 2-power minion plays or VP farming. Whenever you could play multiple minions, the Jumpers kept your hand well stocked and were great candidates. But before Time Box, the Time Travelers struggled to play the Jumpers by themselves, and the Jumpers also provide value by triggering Time Box faster. Dr. Wen can be used as part of a big play, but the Jumpers become an engine, and I think they have taken on a more important role in the post-Titan era. They are my go-to pick for destruction-based VP farming because they actually visit the discard pile and count as being destroyed. Not every minion does that. My number 2 is the Groupie. The Monarch is great, but it's pretty obvious the Monarch's role is to get groupies, as they are the primary minion of the Rockstars. They have very few counters, and the potential to add 10 power with a single minion play is great, not to mention any benefits that come from high minion quantities. They are important enough to also be the clear target of the guest star double features, and it's obvious that this minion is the highlight of the Rockstars. They were an easy and immediate choice for the list, but my number 1 was surprising, especially to me. What makes number 1 so interesting for this tier is that, at the core of the synergies, the ability has nothing to do with what the faction offers. You can use this card in its most raw, simplistic form, and everyone can use that. Everyone. And there are so many factions who can enhance this in a number of ways. And this minion has barely been out. Of course, it's the Deputy. Because it is a discard on your turn, this is actually unblockable. As of now, Eliza does not block it because you aren't playing a card, just using an ability, which is not the same thing. You can add a free 8 power for no extra plays, greatly reducing your hand size while triggering discard benefits. They work well with cards like Not Enough Bullets or Across the Divide, where they can all be retrieved back into your hand. The upper boundary of this type of play is 16 power with just an action, and that's incredible. The deputies far outclass the sheriff and are my number 1 consideration for cowboy synergies. Moving on to tier 3, my number 5 is the ship's engineer. I really like the ship's captain's search potential, but the ship's engineer gives new purpose to all the other Starroomer cards. She is the card that both the science officer and the medical officer chain into. It turns Port Me Up into an after the base scores movement card, allowing you to persist powerful minions. Mass Teleport now actively helps you while still hurting your opponents. The ship's engineer turns these cards from average to strategy driving, and I really like that. My number 4 is the Tenacious Z. The Zombie Lord needs specific pairings to actually be useful, but it's hard to argue with 3 minions that can be played for free. The zombies even have a specific card practically designed for usage with them. While the zombie minions are largely powerful, the Tenacious Z is synonymous with the annoyance that the zombies bring and speaks for itself. My number 3 is the Black Trooper. I wanted to cheat and put the Green Trooper in, the Mega Troopy Shinobi, but I actually find myself drawn to Black Trooper more, and not just because he was my favorite growing up. Black Trooper takes skill to unlock, but there are a number of multi-base strategies where Black Trooper absorbs power on another base and ends up causing that base to score as well. I personally find the Red Trooper underwhelming, and he doesn't lead to many synergies, but the Black Trooper is only bound by the number of specials you can play. When combined with the deputies, they essentially provide 3 power for a free play, and that's awesome. Plus, the Black Trooper draws power from any player, not just you. This minion can go to great heights and can easily surprise people. My number 2 is the Cat Burglar. As I mentioned in my swipe video, there are multiple main thief strategies, but I think the Cat Burglar is the most viable. This is because you can create a singularly large minion that is tough to counter and can reach big drop potential that outperforms King Rex. Because I find blind treasure draws to be fairly useless, the Master Thief seems to really be in service to the Cat Burglar, who essentially triples the value of every treasure that the Master Thief draws. I may not be a fan of this faction, largely because of its actions, but I cannot deny that the Cat Burglar is its primary focus. It's because of my disdain for blind treasure draws that my number 1 is the Gold Digger. Granted, this has the potential to be useless if there is no discard pile, but I don't think that the play on minion treasures are that noteworthy, other than putting them on Loot Lover. But the reason I picked the Gold Digger is that it has the potential to recur the few powerful treasures that are out there. I've used this to spam Potion of Halitosis and Potion of Paralysis to affect every base scoring in a game. The Gold Digger can also replicate most of the Dwarf King's ability via their 3 copies, where each one grabs a card the Dwarf King would have returned anyway. You also get access to treasures other players have played, something the Dwarf King cannot do. Quite recently, I was playing a 2-player game where Wishing Ring happened to be in the discard pile, and I was 1 Gold Digger away from losing. The Dwarf cards put treasures in the discard pile specifically to allow Gold Digger to shine. Dwarf King cannot provide value from treasures played in the past, but the Gold Digger can, allowing you to have the cards to grow your Loot Lover, which is why he is number 1 for this tier. For the final tier, this is a lot harder because the 4s should really shine better than the 5s. It's only a 1-tier difference. But for my number 5, we have the only crossover on the list, the Gravedigger. I actually think both zombie minions outclass the Zombie Lord, to the point that I wonder if the Gravedigger and the Zombie Lord abilities should be switched. In most cases, I'd rather have 1 powerful minion queued up than several low-powered minions stranded on bases where they won't be used. Zombie Lord is facilitating a future play that won't really happen, and I just like Gravedigger so much more. Number 4 is the Mechanic, who can provide some devastating power bursts by replaying key actions a second time. Rotary Slug Thrower and Agromotive are the easy picks, but I really like spamming Overrun to give me a base by myself. The Steam Queen has too much potential to do nothing, and it's rare that a faction can actually affect multiple actions. The Steam Queen is usually used for its printed power, whereas I always have a specific plan in mind for the mechanic. If I'm playing a Gravedigger and I have both options to retrieve, I'm definitely grabbing the mechanic. Number 3 is Funbear, who always grabs my attention when it's out in play. This thing is just annoying, and I have to be careful every time. Granted, it is mandatory, and this can backfire if I can manipulate its power, but it elevates what is otherwise a boring faction to me. The Snuggly Bears often underwhelm, and Lovely Bear doesn't do much as a starter minion, but Funbear does, and can provide long-term value, while Sir Squeezes has no good teddy bear targets, and very few targets overall. Give away of control of Funbear, and you can make some very interesting moves because of its ability. Number 2 is one of my all-time favorite minions, but one not talked about enough, Glimmer. Reducing -4 power is one of the greatest stall tactics, and you can do this twice. With the Werewolf Titan, good luck getting your opponents to score bases on their turn. I love using Glimmer to turn minions of power 6 or less into great white targets. She can throttle bases to not score, or advance her own base by increasing her own power. I like Titania, but I love Glimmer, and it is so hard to work around her ability. She is an easy number 2. But my number 1 was obvious to me, because this minion is a downright necessity for his faction, the Foot of the King. I hate playing Ignobles without him in play, because it adds too much risk to give away your minions. Granted, this does turn the act of giving away a minion into a gimmick. Your single sneaky squire is now a convoluted Zapbot with no cap on the power, but with a hill that strolls, the gimmick now becomes a means to get free power. Aunt of Drakes is good, but if you never see a Foot of the King, I don't think you can win playing Ignobles, not without extreme luck or king-making. The Ignobles only have so many ways to take back control, and to do so for free is absolutely crucial. As you can see, there are many ordinary minions who are in fact extraordinary. Sometimes the King Minion is useless, other times the subordinate is rising to the challenge. What are your picks for each category? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down.